So my hot take is that we need to have a very honest and open and non-judgmental and non-religious and non-hot-headedness conversation about the word forgiveness, right? And the reason I put all those disclaimers out there is because I'm just starting. I mean, it's a question I've always had, but my initial question has always been, what does forgiveness look like in order for people to say that you have forgiven? Because if you really look at it, forgiveness in certain situations, not in all of them, requires a level of sacrifice. And that sacrifice isn't usually from the person that has to be forgiven, it's usually from the person that has to do the forgiving. It's either a sacrifice of timeline, because you have to forgive now, you have to forgive upon the request for forgiveness, you have to forgive before you feel like you have dealt with whatever it is that you need to deal with or whatever it is that you've needed to address, right? That's the first part. Second part is the fact that if you really look at it, it's always usually mostly women who are being asked to forgive. So now you're putting sacrifice and women in the same sentence, and we are right back to where society always wants to put women. Because here's the thing, if I have a glass of water, right, and I walk into a tunnel, and the only way that I can get to the opposite side of this tunnel is if I drink every single drop of that cup. Like, I cannot share that a drop with anyone. And in that tunnel is the person that I'm forgiving, having to forgive, or whatever the case is, and they are in desperate need of a drop, right? And you guys are telling me that forgiveness means I will give them a drop. And I'm like, but I just told you, in order for me to stay alive to make it to the other side of the tunnel, I need every single drop of that water. So I must sacrifice a drop, meaning I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't know what their scenario and their circumstance is. But if I let go of a drop, I'm not going to make it. That's what you guys are asking of us. And the time frame thing is a very underrated factor, because forgiveness almost puts you in a position where you are not allowed to get angry. You're not allowed to feel that. Forgiveness almost gets you in a time where you're still like grieving, or you're sad, or, but you don't really get to be angry, right? And I think that's borderline intentional for a number of reasons. A world where women get to feel their anger is is a world where a lot of quote unquote bad people or bad intentional people will not get to survive, right? That's the first part. But also another part, it's like, it's a level of suppression. Is that the word I'm looking for? Of oppression, my bad. Of oppression, where you're making women have to keep doing this every single time something happens to them, because you're putting this lid that keeps us down. And the reasoning it keeps us down is because if you forgive, you get favor. If you forgive, you, again, please, I'm not questioning religion. I'm not bringing any of that into it. I'm having an honest conversation as a human being who's allowed to think and who's allowed to practice free will in terms of how I need to justify any of these things for myself. But what I'm saying is, you're putting this lid on women where you're just like, no, you have to forget. And the women are like, but I'm angry. No, you have to forgive. They're shutting us up by saying forgive your abuser, forgive your molester, forgive the person who did you wrong, forgive the family member, forgive the guys. And forgiveness, again, within a certain time frame, also puts you in a position whereby you don't get to fully live the extent of your grief. Do you understand what I mean? Because say, for instance, your partner cheated and you forgive them within a certain period of time because you guys need to get back together again and make things work. You don't get to relive the full extent of your grief. So in 6 months or in a year, when you're re-grieving the thing, you don't get to bring it up again and be like, oh, plus remember a year ago when you... Nope. Why? Because you forgave. So shut it down. And while forgiveness initially, I'm 100% sure, had good intentions, we need to acknowledge the fact that we live in a space whereby forgiveness can very easily be weaponized. Because I can do whatever I want, because I live in a world where it's enabled, and it can be covered up by me just going to the next person and being like, hey, please forgive me, sharp. Now I've cleared my conscience and I can just kind of carry on. And if I'm a woman and I don't forgive, there's a very high chance that I will always feel some level of guilt, because I've been taught that if I don't, then there's going to be some black thing that forms in my heart that will completely consume me and completely take over my life, that I will never be able to move on, right? But the reality is also that whether I forgive or I don't, the steps after forgiveness are the same. I, as a person, as an individual, have to literally pick up the pieces of my life from the floor and find a way to glue them back together through this entire process and be able to move on. That is a standard rule of how this thing goes. You can't avoid it. So whether you say you've forgiven someone or whether you say you haven't forgiven someone, you still have to go through the entire process by yourself. So that is why I ask, what does forgiveness actually look like? Because if it means that I have to sacrifice the last drop of water or some level of self-sacrifice in order for someone else's conscience to be cleared, we've been duped entirely and completely, and it will always be on women. Always. And my other thing is, why have we never been given a version of it that looks like me being allowed to be angry, me being allowed to fume, being allowed to be so fired up and feel every single part of this thing that I'm going through, so that by the time I'm done with it, I can be like, okay, cool, I'm ready now. And even after all that, you actually just do not exist. I will not give you the satisfaction of you offloading something onto me in order for your conscience to be cleared and for you to be able to move forward. And technically, I think that's the type of power that is being taken away from us as women. Because I also feel like as women, if we're taught that if we put ourselves first, we're going to be punished for it, right? That is why there's such high levels of guilt every time a woman starts to put themselves first. And that is something that we have to be able to work through. Because I also think that on the other side of that, women who are allowed to, one, feel the full extent of their grief, or two, really, really, really allow themselves to be angry enough, are women who do not enable a lot of the things that we are going through as a society and as a community.